So now you know what idealism is. Now it's time to look at its counterpart. Remember, political scientists, they're usually interested in certain theories. If you study American government, they look at elitism versus pluralism. If you look at international politics, they look at realism versus idealism. If you take it for comparative politics in the spring, you'll have arguments about whether a parliament system is better than a presidential system, or whether federalism is better than unitary system. Because you already know all that ideology stuff, nor should you, if you're doing your job, be trying to influence your ideology. You want to be liberal, conservative, moderate, or power to you. But be the smartest liberal, conservative, or moderate that you possibly can be. That would be all I would suggest to you. If you just get influenced by what your professor says on your ideology, keep digging around, keep looking. Certainly your life experiences will dictate a lot of your ideology. Ideologies are part of your belief systems. What we're doing is we're looking at theories that people have about how politics work. And they're a little different from you, because if you think about it, liberals, moderates, and conservatives are all in one camp. Idealism, right? You've got Christians and Muslims in the same camp. They're all idealists, right? You've got capitalists and socialists. You've got communists all in one camp. Isn't that amazing? Because what is idealism all about? Ideas. Perfect. It's all about ideas. People who are motivated by any kind of idea, whether it be economic, political, military, otherwise. To which most of you are probably thinking, what else could there be, Dr. Tures? The other says you take all those ideas and ideology out of the equation. You should only focus on one thing. I told you this class wasn't going to be too hard. What is that one word that realism is all about? Go ahead.
Real.
Well, okay, yeah, real. Okay, it's not going to be that simple. Although people who subscribe to this theory believe that theirs is the more realistic. Anybody ever see the Harry Potter movies? Raise your hand if you've ever seen the Harry Potter movie or you read the book. Okay, they're kind of cool books. I started reading them before we had kids. I'm reading book 6 to my son. My daughter's read it 20 times or so. They really get into that. You ever seen the first movie, at least?
Yes.
You've got the bad guy, and this is the one where he's growing out of somebody's back head. Ever seen it? You ever seen that? And he's telling Harry, this is the first time he meets Harry Potter, and he tells him something that it sounds pretty counterintuitive. He goes, there is no good or evil. There is only what?
Power?
Yes! There is only power, and those afraid to use it. Realism, when you boil it on down, the very core essence of realism, it's all about power. More specifically, people look at national security. It's all about protecting yourself. There is no good or evil. It is not a theory of immorality, it is a theory of amorality. How is amoral different from immoral? Anybody ever heard this one before?
It's like not moral.
Right.
Immoral is not moral, and then
Yeah.
immoral is like that.
Yeah. It's not moral versus immoral, it's kind of in between. It's amoral. It's like they're morals. Morals are just human creation, something that we just made up. It's all about power. You either use it or you suffer because you don't. You protect yourself or you fail to protect yourself. Tough, huh? But also realistic, isn't it? Realists would certainly say so. Everything else is just window dressing. The belief is that conflict is just in our inherent nature. You ever seen Terminator 2? Okay, I know it's a long time ago, I was an undergrad, but you ever seen that? Where like they asked, can humans survive? The kid asked the Terminator, can humans survive? And you remember what Arnold Schwarzenegger says? You ever see that? It is in your nature to destroy yourselves. Because according to the Terminator, and the computers that programmed it, human nature, conflict is just inherent. It's going to happen. You can have some nice people. We're in a rich country. Most of our basic needs are met. Take that all away. How would we act if there was a famine? All crops due to some genetic disease, or maybe a terrorist attack, all American crops fail. Take that away. Take away our basic happy security, and how will we react to each other? It'll be like that Walking Dead series, right? Now, I don't watch the series. I'll get around to it. There's so much work. But it's usually humans versus zombies, but the humans ever kind of disagree with each other in the series? My daughter's having me read this Maze Runner series. I'm reading Sports Trials. So you got humans against humans. Sometimes they're pitted for scarce resources. Yeah, put us in a position where our basic needs aren't met day to day, when our fridges aren't full of food that can fill our needs, that we have enough, generally enough money to get what we need or what we want, or someone can help us out. Then what will we have? Then where is your religion? Then where is your perfect economic system of free market? Or how many people would turn, if all crops failed, who wouldn't turn to a dictator who would say, I'm going to solve this problem. We're going to stop all these food riots and people killing each other. We're going to have martial law. No, free-loving Americans would never support that. That goes against our ideals of democracy and economic freedom. How many people would chuck all those ideas for their next meal? And so that's where states or governments of national security. The goal of national security is to give all power to the government. Why do you think the Libertarian Party is not enamored with the Patriot Act? The ends justify the means, but the end is power, not about preserving every single aspect of human life. It's preserving your life. What did General Patton say? Most people think of General Patton as like a realist. I don't want our boys dying for our country. I want their guys dying for their country. Not nice, but realist. According to you. Nothing about ideology. Liberal, moderate, conservative. Anybody ever seen Evil Dead? This was a big cult classic in the 80s. They remade Evil Dead. You ever seen the original Evil Dead? They made one called Army of Darkness. You ever seen these? They had Evil Dead 2, or Evil Dead 3, Army of Darkness. We all went, we got everybody we knew in college got all together. It was like the world's largest Big Bang Theory meeting or so. And we all saw Army of Darkness. And there's a scene in there where, I can't show it, obviously. This person's yelling about evil or good or something like that. And the main character, Ash, pulls out a shotgun, blows that zombie villain character away, and he goes, good, bad. I'm the guy with the good. Because he wields his sawed-off shotgun. And that's what realism is. People aren't going out there to be good or evil. They are going out there for self-preservation. Protect yourself. Everything's about national security. Stronger country should be able to protect its citizens. If it can't, it better get some power. What else could you do if you're a small country? What do you do if you're going to be overrun? Let's say you're one of those countries on the border with Russia right now. Russia's bigger than you. What do?
You make allies.
You better make allies. You better. Ukrainians were against joining NATO. Now, at least the Western side is very interested in joining NATO. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, former members of the Soviet Union, Baltic countries, they're like, come on over, bring stuff to us. Because they saw what happened to the Republic of Georgia. They saw what's happening in Ukraine. They saw what happened to Crimea. Crimea River. And it's like, okay, we're gonna get flattened like, oh, I don't know. Have you heard of any historical stories of small countries that got flattened by big, powerful governments? Anyone? Sing it out. Take a risk. Take a guess. Just not an educated guess, because it's not a hypothesis. You can make an educated guess, it just ain't a hypothesis. But give me a case. Give me an example.
What was the question?
Big country flattens small country. Happens a lot, doesn't it? I gave you some Russia examples just in the past few years. Yeah, one of our students who took international politics, who was from the Republic of Georgia, was in the Republic of Georgia when Russia launched their all-out attack. And was Facebook messaging. Yeah, he was kind of conscripted into the Georgia military because they needed all hands on deck. But he became an ambulance driver, dodging shots from Russia. Yeah, classmate. You never know. Any examples of small countries flattened by big ones? Can you think of them in history?
Poland got flattened by Germany.
Poland got smashed by Germany. What did Poland do to deserve that? Do y'all know what Poland did to deserve getting flattened? Well, the Germans demanded a corridor to this seaport that they owned in the middle of the northern Poland that was on the ocean. They said, give us a chunk of territory so we can get to our seaport. We're tired of like sailing in and out. We want a nice land bridge to it. Poland said, no. So Poland was destroyed. Any other? Who's that country that beat us in the World Cup? Who eliminated us from the World Cup? Who eliminated them in 1914 and in 1940? Belgium? Don't y'all remember that? So fast. Belgium got flattened twice by Germany. Any others? Smaller countries? Get gobbled up? Anyone in history? Go ahead. Come on, through your examples. Dr. Tures, we're taking this so we learn them. Yeah, come across any?
Korea.
Huh?
Korea.
Yeah, North Korea attacked South Korea.
Well, the Japanese occupation.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, Japan knocking off Korea. That's tough for the Korea.
Maybe a reverse one for Finland and Russia.
Oh, yeah. Soviet Union stomp over Finland. Why? It was in the way.
Oh, there's also
Finland didn't do anything really to deserve it.
and Russia tried to invade Finland.
Yeah, they
held them off for a really long time.
They did. You are correct. 1940. And that's why, if you take me for international conflict, you realize that, I mean, even though Denmark said, we won't fight you, we're not going to do anything to you, just let us live independently. Nazis still took Denmark. They marched on it. There was even a deal where Denmark could stay independent. They wanted to be like Switzerland. Hey, you know why Switzerland wasn't taken in World War II? I went to Switzerland. I asked that question. How come you guys were like the only ones holding out like the Alamo or something during World War II? And they actually got the Swiss learned that Hitler pretty much, you know, when he has his to-do list and he's taken most every West European country, he looks down at Switzerland and goes, yeah, I never took Switzerland. So he was starting to gear up his forces to smash Switzerland. If you know anything about the Swiss, this has happened a couple times before in their history, so they were ready for this. They broke out all the weapons they have, and they're almost like Texas in terms of weaponization over in Switzerland. They got everything out, everybody was in their caves, they put up all their defensive stuff. They wouldn't have defeated Germany. Germany would have eventually smashed them, but it would have chewed up so many German forces that Hitler decided it wasn't worth smashing Switzerland. The Swiss took steps to protect themselves. They're not just neutral, they were neutral and armed. They pretty much they didn't wait around to see what Hitler was going to do. All along they kept arming themselves, so whatever year it was, 42 or 43, they were ready, and it's pretty much, yeah, you'll take us, we'll all die, but you'll lose so many soldiers, it won't be worth it. You might need them for all those Americans coming over the Atlantic Ocean, or those Brits coming from the English Channel. You might need them there. We're no threat to you. That's what Hitler decided. But not because Hitler was nice. If you think about it, Hitler didn't see himself as evil. He's not like, I will advance the cause of evilness. No, he's like, he saw everybody else as a threat to Germany. He would strike then before they got it. Perhaps it's not our ideas. We like America because it's more about national security today rather than patriotism. Patriotism and national security are kind of like two sides of the same coin. Nationalism, they call it in other countries. But it's not about our ideas. How many times you hear that argument? It's like, the enemy attacked us because they hate our ideas. That's one way to look at it. Incompatible ideas. Idealists can fight each other, right? You can fight over ideas. Or is it just one power versus another power? When you boil everything down, it's us versus them. Who here has seen Red Dawn? My favorite movie growing up in Texas. We grew up in the deserts with all these knockoff guns and stuff like that. We decided to do all the training we could for when the Russians and Cubans would come over the Mexican border just a couple miles away. It was like closer to us than Alabama is to here. And before you think this is a race-based thing, almost all my friends were Hispanic, so they were just as concerned about Russians and Cubans coming over. We were going to totally take them, so we did all the training we could. Red Dawn was our favorite movie. You ever see that scene where they not only killed the Russian soldier they captured, but the one guy who was forced to wear a tracker? Do you remember that? And they're having an argument about whether they should execute him. One guy's like, this isn't right, we're Americans, we're different from them. The other's, hey, they do the same to us. Yeah, but we're Americans, we're supposed to be different. Do you remember the explanation why the guy pulled out the gun to shoot them? When Charlie Sheen asks, what makes them different from us? You remember the response? I think it's Patrick Swayze says, because we live here.
Thinking about the new
Oh yeah, the new one's good. If you can find the premise that North Korea can conquer us, I think we're a little tough. But yeah, I know they had both. Originally it was written like China was taking over the U.S., but China was like, no, you're not going to do that. We'll block your movie from our market. If you have somebody else attack, we'll let you make your billions with everyone going to see it. And so the film production crew changed who the villain was. That's why you never get to know as much about the villain. Did y'all know that? What makes Americans different from Iranians? It's where we live. We perceive them to be a threat, they perceive us to be a threat. Has nothing to do with religion, has nothing to do with ideology, has nothing to do with anything else. If we see them as a threat, we'll act. If we don't see them as a threat, we won't attack. That's all it comes down to. It has nothing to do with any ideas. The only idea is power. And when we sit down, now sometimes you make peace deals, right? If we decide that Iran, teaming up with Iran will make us more powerful against Arabic countries that don't like us, sure, we'll make that deal. After all, Iran used to be known as America's largest aircraft carrier in the Middle East. They used to be our #1 ally until 1979, even more so than Israel, because Israel's small. We back Israel not because they're Jewish, not because they have a democratic system, not because they're capitalist, because they're not. They're socialist, actually. Far more socialist than us. I know from Israeli scholars who are free market types. Yeah, we like Israel because we think supporting Israel will make us more powerful. If not, we'd sell them out in a heartbeat. Actually, when Truman decided to recognize Israel and form, it's not an alliance because alliances are illegal in the Israeli Constitution, but when we decided to make Israel the informal friend, there were just as many Texans who wanted us to back the Arabs, especially for oil purposes. Why not? They were our allies in World War I, teamed up against the Ottoman Empire. You ever see Lawrence of Arabia? It was a 50-50 shot who we would have taken. We decided Israel's not our, if Israel bombs the Iranian nuclear reactor, they retaliate against us. If we don't think Israel's going to help us, if we think Israel's going to be a hindrance rather than a help, we'll drop them, if you're a realist. Lord Palmerston, he was the Prime Minister of Britain during the US Civil War. Probably never heard of him. He's got a great quote. You ever heard the Lord Acton one about absolute power corrupts absolutely? Palmerston's got a better one. Lord Palmerston said, you ready for this? England has no permanent friends or enemies, only permanent interests. That is realism to the core. Think how many times England and France fought each other from the 1500s through the 1800s. But Palmerston was willing to team up with Napoleon III. Why? Russia was more of a threat. That same country, those same pair of countries disputed over Africa, where to colonize, the Fashoda crisis. But a decade later, they're best buddies in World War I. If you believe in permanent friends and allies, it's usually because of ideas. And you're biasing yourself according to realists. Kind of an anti-theory. It's not a nice theory. They don't call themselves the nicism. You ever hear of these characters? Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince, he himself is not a prince. He's writing how princes should act. I mean, geez, don't we even think of Machiavelli? He's not like trying to say, here's how to be evil. Think about this. It is better to be feared than loved.
True.
Excellent advice if you want to get into teaching. This paper's perfectly good. Ah. Yeah, everyone tries to get in, they think, like, I've even told people who want to get into teaching, like, I asked the education majors when I teach them in the spring, I was like, so why do you all want to be teachers? Like, I love kids, we'll have some. Don't get into teaching because you love kids. You gotta love your subject matter. You gotta love it that you'll want to show the students that you'll go through a brick wall for your subject matter, because the kids won't always like you. They really won't. Raise your hand if you'd rather be watching the first season of Breaking Bad. Go ahead. I'm not looking. Raise your hand. How many of you want to see Breaking Bad? Nick, what's my count?
0.
Okay. A better TV show. Okay. What's the cool TV show? Okay. So
I
Walking
was just
Dead.
laying down in the bed.
Oh, okay. How many would you rather be napping? Okay, Nick, what's my count?
The whole class.
Oh, class? Guys. All right. That's better to be feared than that's why I take attendance. You use any tactic necessary to stay in power. Once you're out of power, you're gone. You're at the mercy of somebody else. You put yourself in a bad position. Anybody ever seen the Clint Eastwood movie, The Unforgiven? He won an Oscar for it. He directed it. He was in it. Got a bunch of Oscars that year. Best Picture. You ever seen The Unforgiven? There's someone who had been threatening him, and Clint Eastwood confronts him with a gun and shoots him. One of the other bad guys goes, "You just shot an unarmed man!" Clint Eastwood's response? Anybody seen it?
Shoots the other guy.
He should have armed himself. See, shooting an unarmed person is wrong, right? But for a realist, it was practical. Why wait for the guy to edge over to find a gun or pull it out? Why wait? Just shoot him. If you perceive this person as a threat. You ever see Three Musketeers? The one with Kiefer Sutherland, Charlie Sheen. I know, okay, it came out a long time ago. But they did a reboot that's kind of like a steampunk version. You ever seen that? The other Three Musketeers? That's why they haven't made the sequel yet. Had Orlando Bloom in it. This isn't helping, is it? But they had this religious character, Cardinal Richelieu. He's a real person. And he's a real prick. What's a cardinal anyway? I mean, from football or baseball. What's a cardinal? What are they supposed to do? Birds. Birds. Okay. Not the bird, not the sports.
Catholic.
They're what?
Catholic.
Catholic. What about Catholic? I mean, what are they in Catholic? What's a cardinal supposed to do?
It's like the leader or?
Yeah, just about. I mean, you're like, they picked the Pope. They're like one step below Pope. That's like Catholic to the end, almost nth degree, right? You were like Catholic Central. If you were a cardinal. And yet, he would make deals on the side. You ever watch some movies? He's always making deals with this Duke of Buckingham in England. You're like, what the heck is Buckingham? That's England, which was Protestant. And he sold out his Catholic allies in Austria. He was not an idea guy. I know he's cardinal, but he wasn't cardinal, I think, because he was a holy person. He was cardinal because it's a powerful position. He was like basically prime minister of France. But he wasn't advancing the church. He was advancing himself and France. He wanted France to be the superpower. And even if that meant cutting his Habsburg buddies from Austria at the knees and making secret deals with Protestants, playing one side off the other. James is like, what a jerk! It's realism. Thomas Hobbes, political philosopher, wrote the Leviathan. It's a philosophy text. Came out in 1648. He says, life is nasty, brutish, and short. People might have said life, because I assumed one time wrote, Thomas Hobbes wrote, people are nasty, brutish, and short. Well, I know diet was different back then, but life is nasty, brutish, and short. That is the state of nature. Total freedom. No government. You can do anything. No rules. Life is nasty, brutish, and short because, think about this. What if the U.S. government dissolved tomorrow, completely? Why not? We're how many trillion bankrupt? What if we just defaulted, declared bankruptcy? Oh, that'll never happen, Dr. Tures. Oh, really? There's not supposed to be some government shutdown this month? Well, I don't know. What if the Chinese stock market falls again and takes our stock market down with it? Government collapses. There'll be no government. It'll be like the state of nature. And we'll all be nice, community-loving people. We'll play guitar and sing Kumbaya and help each other out. Share our food with each other. It's the Christian thing to do. We'll rebuild democracy. Why not? It was such a great governing system. Everyone should be equal, politically equal. Or how many think it's going to be a lot more like that zombie thing? I keep saying walk the line. That's not right. What is the Walking Dead? Yeah, Walk the Line is the Johnny Cash one. How many think in this total anarchy system? Well, if you learned that the government was going to shut down by the weekend, how many of you would go to Walmart for your AR-15? What would you do? If you learned the government was going to collapse by this weekend, would you run and get a gun, as many bullets as you could, and just liquidate your ATM card and be a prepper and get everything? Or would you run, form like a community association group so you can pool resources, have like some degree of organization, protect as many people as possible? What are you going to do?
If you knew 100%, or you just assuming?
You can never know anything 100%, right?
No.
What about 90%?
I'll pool my resources with everybody else.
I do both.
How?
I remember, and this is true, when the stock market was in free fall, when Wall Street was about to collapse, a North Carolina senator, after getting like a private briefing about how everything was going, he like ran to an ATM and he called his wife and he said, pull everything out. And I thought, that's stupid, it's a bunch of paper. You should have gone to like the Army surplus store, if you really thought it was that bad. I know, put everything in gold. Gold is nothing more than a nice shiny rock to bash somebody in the head and take their feet. That's all gold is when the chips are down. It's all about supplies, right? That's realism, folks, isn't it? Do you think it would be that way? Or do you think we're better people than that? Do you think that we realize that there are strength in numbers rather than individual survivalism? That we could get by together with some organization, we could ride out any disaster? Or would it be more like Hurricane Katrina? What was Hurricane Katrina anyway? Was it people taking out people? Or was it people trying to band together to survive the greatest disaster that hit this country since the 1900s? Didn't you see kind of evidence of both? I feel like Christopher Nolan, that director from the Batman Dark Knight. Who are we? Is this not an important debate? It's not a liberal or conservative when Hurricane Katrina comes down. It's, are you going to cling to ideas or focus heavily on defending yourself? When the chips are down, where do you stand? See you on Monday. Don't forget to study for Wednesday's exam. If you do go prep, or at least still study for the exam in case there's a 10% chance that we'll still all be here. Oh, did that last part get recorded? Those people missing the class are going to have a good laugh.